Today I'm installing this AP Racing brake kit on the Astra VXR. Before we can install the big brake kit that we rebuilt in the last episode, we first have to remove the stock calipers. There are two bolts holding the body of the caliper onto the caliper carrier, and we also have to remove the banjo bolt for the brake line. We just have to prise this anti-vibration spring off, and then the caliper can come apart, ready to remove the pads. And hey, it looks like I got my money's worth. These are almost wore down to the backing plate. Now we can also remove the caliper carriers, as we won't be needing these when the new brake kit goes on. And with the disc removed, we're already halfway there. Or I guess a quarter, because we've only pulled apart one of the front brakes. These new discs are 345mm vented discs from a Astra VXR, which are quite a bit of an upgrade over the 320mm vented discs from the Astra VXR. These discs are dirt cheap at £100 for a pair from Pagid. So although my big brake kit should have come with two-piece discs, these'll do for now, since they'll actually cost me way less in the long run as track consumables. The banjo bolt on my new AP calipers is a different size to the stock calipers, so we're going to have to replace this brake line. This might not be the case for all big brake kits, but it probably will be for a lot of them. Unfortunately, since we've had the brake lines disconnected, we are going to have to bleed the brake fluid later, but that'll give us a perfect opportunity to upgrade to high temp racing fluid. And here you can see the difference in size between the old discs and the new ones. I have to reattach the brackets to the calipers after I took them off for a rebuild in the last video, which you can check out on my YouTube channel, and unfortunately, due to the fresh powder coat in these holes, the bolts did have to be tapped in to get them through. But there we have it, one massive AP Racing 4-pot caliper ready to go on the car. This kit seems to make use of a stack of 3 washers between the caliper bracket and the hub to space the caliper backwards so it's centered on the disc, which is also the case of the Brembo retrofit kit from Nevlock. I don't love this, so I might eventually get a little spacer made up, just for my own peace of mind, but for now this'll do the job. Before you go rush into the comments, you will see me throw everything together in this video, and not touch a torque wrench once, but I assure you I torqued everything up before putting the wheels on. I just didn't film it because I was in a rush to get my car back on the road. As you can see, there's now a decent gap between the disc and the caliper, and we can go ahead with fitting the other end of the brake line to the new caliper. With the brake line properly secured, it's time to install the pads. These are Ferodo DS2500s, which have been used for about 500 miles by the previous owner of this brake kit. The pads on most of your spicy 4-pot kits are going to be held in by these 2 pins with an anti-vibration spring in the middle. You simply slide these in, get them over the spring, and then hammer them in the last bit of the way with a 4.5mm punch. With it all bolted together, it's a good idea to give it a nice clean up so that it looks pretty when the wheels go on. Now it's time to do the other side, and since we've done it once, of course we're an expert, so it'll take half as long. Wait a minute, this isn't a big break. Since my MOT was due and every pad on the car was worn to below 2mm, I figured I'd throw some new rear pads on as well, and some discs while I was at it. These come apart in a similar way to the front, except you need 2 spanners to get the sliders off, before you can remove the caliper to get to the pads and the bracket and of course the disc. I've not bothered with grooved discs this time around purely because the discs that came with my second-hand bargain brake kit are also not grooved and I want it to match, and on the rears, grooved discs aren't doing much heavy lifting anyway. The stock single piston calipers need to be wound back in before a new pad can go in, and you also want to make sure you open the brake reservoir before doing this because you'll be pushing fluid back up the brake lines and it could overflow. For the rear pads, I'm just using another set of EBC yellow stuffs which I had on before, because DS2500s to match the front are £135 for the rear of the Astra, which is just ludicrous money to spend on rear pads for an Astra. But now the calipers can go back together, and we're just about done with this big brake upgrade. Before we can drive anywhere, we're going to have to bleed the brakes, since we had some brake lines disconnected earlier on in the video. The fluid I'm using is RBF 660, and I'm using a pressure bleeder to make it easier to bleed the brakes on my own without a helper. This works by attaching a pressurized bottle full of brake fluid to your reservoir, and the air pressure to force the fluid through the lines comes from a tyre. With the pressure bleeder hooked up, we can start to open the bleed nipples, starting from the rear of the car, as far away from the brake reservoir as possible, so in this case on the passenger side. We're going to wait until all the air bubbles stop coming out, as you can see here, and then nip the bleed nipple back up. Then we repeat this for the driver side rear, and then the passenger side front caliper, and finally the driver side front caliper. You'll find that on 4-pot calipers you actually have 2 bleed nipples, one on the outside and one on the inside. You should start with the outside and then bleed the inside, since the outside is furthest from the hydraulic fitting. These should be on top of the calipers. If they're not, you fitted your new calipers upside down and you won't be able to bleed them. With all 4 calipers bled 2 times over, we're almost ready to test out the new brakes. I'm just siphoning out some extra brake fluid since we were filled over the max by the pressure bleeder, and then I'm going to switch the car on the ramps and just test that the brakes actually work. As you can see, when I hit the brakes they grab the discs and slow them down, or even stop them if I put the clutch in, which is a good sign. So I think we can call this a successful upgrade. Except for one little hiccup. I noticed when fitting the wheels, they actually hit the calipers, which is quite common depending on which wheels and which brake calipers you have. To get around that issue, I'm fitting spacers, but with spacers you need longer bolts, and if I'm going for longer bolts I might as well do a stud conversion and not have to fiddle around lining up the wheel and the spacer and the hub every time I go to change wheels, for example when I get some slicks for the track. These are M-Tech 60mm studs with 38mm of thread exposed, which is 15mm more thread than I measured on the slim tuner bolts that came with my OZ wheels. I highly recommend, if you have normal wheels that don't use internal drive tuner bolts, just get an Imperial Performance kit, which is much higher quality in my opinion, having tried both, but these M-Tech ones were the only ones that would fit with my setup. I'm just test fitting them hand tight here to make sure that everything clears, because I'm a bit concerned about having what is essentially 20mm more poke than stock wheels, along with the front being so low on the Eibach Sportline lowering springs. That fitment is pretty spot on, if you ask me. Definitely seems to fit, at least at full ride height. Try some steering. That's pretty decent. The rear hasn't settled because it's on the handbrake. But the fitment is brilliant. I've never been one for stancy fitment, but this would be the equivalent of about 20mm spacer on Ronals. This is 15mm spacer and 5mm extra offset on the wheels compared to a Ronal. It's spot on, it just about fits. You would probably struggle with a 19. I am concerned what it'll do when it's loaded up in the corners. It might rub, at which point maybe we need to look into rolling these or a BTCC kit, hey. But for now, yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. So to properly install the stud conversion, now that we know everything's going to fit, we need to apply Loctite to the short end of the stud, get it started by hand so we don't cross thread it. Then I'm going to screw 2 nuts onto the stud and tighten them against each other. This is called the double nut technique, and this lets you spin the stud in using a torque wrench on the outer nut. These are 12mm studs, and a great rule of thumb is that we want 1.5 times the diameter of the stud, full thread engagements, to be safe. So I'm making sure I've got at least 18 full turns on these studs, and I'm checking the torque with the torque wrench just to be safe. Now to repeat this process another 19 times and we'll have our finished stud conversion. How exciting! Through the power of movie magic, you only have to watch me do this another 4 times, at 1 million times speed, and then we can get on with fitting the spacers and the wheels. We have to wait at least 1 hour for the Loctite to go off, so I'm setting a timer, and then it's time for the big reveal. This is my first time seeing how the car looks with the new 15mm spacers and the massive brakes in the daylight, and honestly, it's pretty sick. I'm just going to rock it backwards and forwards on the drive to make sure the brakes actually work before going on the road, and then we can take it for a test drive. A very gentle, slow test drive. Right, so AP Racing Big Brake Kit, what is the verdict? Well, over the stock brakes, these are a huge improvement, I have to say. I had a bit of a vacuum leak from the inlet manifold to the brake booster, which I had to sort out. The pedal feel was awful, like it would change every time I pressed the pedal. Heel towing particularly was just like not possible to do smoothly at all. But I got the Corten A Sport kit for replacing that vacuum line and one-way valve to the brake booster servo, and it's been fine today, so I'm going to assume that is the issue fixed. I also had a bit of a vacuum leak, so it was idling funny and missing on idle as a result of that. So the difference you notice in the brake feel is because you've added more pistons, more piston area in the caliper. What you get is it takes longer, as in further push of the brakes, to get the same sort of braking force, basically. Now that might sound like a bad thing, but you can always press harder, and you have vacuum brake assist, unless you're me yesterday. The brakes aren't going to be too hard to press, but what that gives you is a way bigger resolution between like just slightly slowing down and a full slam on. So you can modulate the brakes a lot better coming into corners. Yeah, the brake feel on these is insanely better than the stock single pistons. You can be so much more precise with it, and that's the main thing you get. But as we'll see next time I get it on track, I'll probably make a video. These shouldn't ever overheat like the stock brakes do, especially with the Frodo DS2500 pads and the RBF 660 fluid. These should be a huge upgrade. The one thing that I have noticed, that you will have noticed in this video as well, is the horrendous squeaking noise, which I will demonstrate on this road now. So, as I drive down here, that's light brake pressure. And that's with the window open. Sounds pretty horrific. But yeah, basically the first time I stopped with these pads, there was a neighbour loading their van up, and they gave me the dirtiest look I've ever had while driving this car. And it's a Vauxhall, so you can imagine I get some dirty looks. Because it can be really bad. Like, when I come home from work, Courtney says she can hear the brakes louder than the exhaust, and it's a 3.5 inch. Like, it's not a quiet exhaust. So, while I would recommend a big brake kit for your Astra VXR, I can't say that I would recommend the AP Racing CP6600 kit. Maybe a Pro 5000, one of the more expensive kits that Raylan sell, but not the CP6600 if you're daily in the car. If it's a dedicated track car, fine. The problem with these APs is the only pads available are like Carbon Lorraine RC5 Plus, EBC RPX, and whatever their endurance pad is called, and Ferodo DS2500, and the more aggressive endurance-y version, DS3000. And that is the limit pretty much of your pad choice, because these, although they have dust boots like a street caliper, like a factory OEM caliper, they aren't really designed for road use. They were designed primarily for the track, I guess, and you just can't get normal road pads for them. You can get EBC blue. I haven't seen anyone selling EBC yellow. If they were available, I'd try them again. They were awful on the stock VXR calipers, but I think I boiled the fluid and glazed the discs. I don't think what I did was actually kill the pads. But anyway, if you liked the video, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.
Every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days. Fuck me, I'm looking in the mirror, so foggy, but I've never seen clearer. I don't really think anyone can save me, and honestly I'm not really sure I want saving. I like to be my own worst enemy. There's no risk if you don't try at anything, so I'ma just keep buying everything. See you in the next life, have to be a better me. I don't think that my head's on straight, gotta flip it and grip it and go and get an x-ray. What's wrong with me? I just feel weight pushing on my chest and it squeezes till I suffocate. Better change my mindset, meditate. It's pretty cool that I'm alive and have better days. I could walk, see, hear, I should celebrate. Think I could change my mind, maybe elevate. Living life, every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days. Yeah, all I need are some better days. Cause all I want, and I pray, I believe in the better days. I'm kinda stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do I work hard, or live at my pace? You're only young once, yeah that's all great, but I also want a future where I'm okay.